Howdy folks, Jabberiki here. The thing about British animation is that it embraces the charm of having a low budget, but also celebrates the eccentricities of our culture. I can think of no other better example of this done really well than Bagpuss. Bagpuss was a British animated stop-motion children's TV show from the 70s that lasted 13 episodes. It was written and narrated by filmmaker Oliver Postgate and designed by artists Peter and Joan Furman. Set during the Victorian era, each episode would have a little girl called Emily stop by a shop to drop off a broken, dirty, or lost item. Then she would bring the toys and antiques that lived in the shop to life, who would work together to identify and restore whatever she gave them. A lot of episodes of this show would follow a certain structure, discuss what the item could be, have a sing-along, tell a story, fix or tidy up the item, and then finally put it in the shop window. Despite the repetitive nature of this formula, the show was not restrained by its episodic traditions, but rather let each item inspire a natural flowing pace and a thematic identity for the episode. This sense of variety mainly comes down to the dynamic of these characters, as they don't all share the same train of thought. A lot of them have polar opposite mindsets, which is what makes their banter and arguments about each item differ each episode. I think to better explain myself, I should talk about the actual characters. Bagpuss himself, a tattered cloth cat, is rather observational, preferring to think, listen and provide knowledge when asked. He might sound and look a bit dopey, but he's very good at taking things in, and the other characters treasure his imagination. He's not one to be argumentative, as he's quite laid back, and he seems to just enjoy spending time with his friends regardless of what the item really is. What I find really interesting is that he's the most powerfully magic character in the shop, because his storytelling is strong enough to fix items on their own, and when he wants to sleep, everyone has to switch off too. However, even though he has all of this power, he doesn't take advantage of it or let it go to his head. He's actually quite humble about his enchanted strength.
Bagpuss. Huh? Bagpuss, you must think of a magic story that will put little broken ships together again. All right then.
Professor Yaffle is the drastic opposite of Bagpuss, a stuffy wood-carved bookend who has a very firm belief in logic and reason, always immediately dismissing fairy tales, magic, or fantasy. Heck, he can get quite annoyed at the other characters for proposing wild creative interpretations, almost like he refuses to have any sense of imagination.
It's a very sad story.
Yep, it's not only sad, it is silly. It's not only silly, it is not true.
He's not malicious or mean-spirited, as he does show love for the other characters, he's just very stubborn and serious. Although, unlike the other more adult characters, who prefer to stay seated, he moves around quite a lot. He's just as active as the youthful mice, most likely because he's so passionate about finding the truth.
It's just as well it is a pink elephant, not a real one.
Why, what difference would that make?
If it was a real elephant, it couldn't fly.
Fly? Elephants don't fly.
Then there's Madeline, who is open to having fun with her imagination, but also very sensible and maternal. She can be stern with the other characters, but only to keep the peace.
No, be careful. No, that's dangerous. Stop at once. That whole heap is dangerous. That heap has only got to fall on poor little Charlie Mouse and he would be squashed.
She doesn't seem to mind how everyone interprets the item as long as they're all happy and safe. The mice are clearly the youngest, being very energetic, inquisitive, and noisy. Characters for the target audience to relate to.
A frog princess? Ridiculous, there's no such thing.
There are in fairy stories.
Yes, fairy stories. Yes, tell us a princess fairy story. Yes, please. Tell us, please.
All right.
Being the ones to interact with the items the most helps them play a big part in gaining knowledge for the group or progressing things forward. Plus, they also use their magical organ to help generate the visuals for songs and stories. However, like real kids, they can get carried away, and Madeline will have to step in to calm things down or tell them off.
Come on, little Charlie Mouse. Come on, everybody. Shove him in the pluggle hole. Push.
Madeline the rag doll didn't like that.
Stop! Oh, stop! You're hurting poor Charlie Mouse. Take him out at once.
They're also the most likely to believe more far-fetched interpretations of the items, which can backtrack debate sometimes.
You can live in a shoe. You can live in a shoe. You can live in a shoe. You can.
Oh, fiddlesticks and flapdoodle.
Gabriel the Frog is pretty sensible but also very creative, being someone who will back up facts but also validate characters' imaginations. By pointing out the existence of a legend or fairy tale, he tends to stay out of conflicts, being quite chill and preferring to get sing-alongs going, hence why he's always attached to his banjo.
I know what that is. That is a cushion cover. It was the cover of a cushion for a king.
The cover of a cushion for a king?
That's right.
He must have been a very small king.
He was very small and very bony and cold too in places.
I know, the bony king of nowhere.
That's right.
Now that you have a better idea of what the characters' personalities are like, you can see why putting them all together can make for some very interesting interactions. There's anarchy and chaos, but also truth, love and creativity. The more lively characters keep things humorous and entertaining, while the more mature characters hold things steady, guide everyone along, and implement each segment of the show in a timely manner. There's often division and confrontation, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to find out what the item really is, because they really hope the owner can collect it back, and presenting it in all of its glory is the key to doing that. No one hates each other, they just have different ideas for how to go about things. Everyone has good intentions and respects each other's feelings, but aren't afraid to take a stand when they disagree.
I know what it is. It's a house.
A house? A house for a mouse?
No, a house for a rag doll.
Ridiculous. That is a piece of cloth, not a house.
I think a major appeal of this series is the relatability of these characters, recognizing people we know in each one, making this ragtag gang easy to spend time with because they share a mutual bond in spite of their differences, and that's immediately identifiable for anyone. They are no less different to you and your loved ones, warts and all. But I think an important question to ask is, what will kids get out of this show? What benefits them? The show isn't educational in the traditional sense, like there's no ABCs or 1, 2, 3s, plus characters never turn to the camera to spell out moral lessons. Bagpuss's value as a teaching tool is far more nuanced than your usual kids' TV show. When it comes down to it, the show is encouraging two important traits for growing kids: curiosity and understanding. The investigation of each item will make kids intrigued to know more, with each new object from Emily being gradually assessed throughout the episode. If characters do get carried away or distracted, Yaffle will always help get everyone back on track or encourage a more sensible route. All of this will teach kids to learn such valuable skills as patience, common sense and concentration.
That's all very well. But telling silly stories hasn't done any good to this wretched piece of straw.
This is a very interactive show too, an aspect that children will love, because they're so eager to play games and inspect new discoveries. The show validates such strong desires, while also helping them to control their overload of emotions during all their excitement. When kids watch this show, they can keep guessing what they think the object is, but also get to hear out other interpretations to help them rethink their ideas and look at the item with a different perspective. It's a wonderful way to make kids use constantly new information to frequently re-evaluate what they're looking at. Now, I did mention that this show includes stories. The stories are brought up to tie into interpretations, serve as an origin tale for where the item came from, or to provide cultural context for the item.
Now, Tavish McTavish lived all by himself in a tiny house high up in the mountains. He lived there not because he liked to live alone, but because he liked to play the bagpipes. He liked to play the bagpipes, but other people didn't like to listen to him playing the bagpipes, because he played them terribly badly.
The stories are all inspired by real folklore and fairy tales from around the world, each one set to illustrations, handmade artwork, or stop-motion animation. Postgate's writing is richly detailed, but not over-comprehensive, always finding charm in the story's message or humour. It's impossible to not get invested in these fantasy fables, because Postgate gives us a picture book reading sort of experience. There's also songs, so what are they like? These songs are written and performed by Sandra Kerr and John Faulkner, who also voiced Madeline and Gabriel. Their music is heavily tied to European traditional folk, perfect for the rural fairy tales being told or mythical legends that are explained, because many of these stories originate from various parts of Europe.
There were comfits in the cabin and apples in the hold. The sails were made of silk and the masts were made of gold.
The 24 sailors that stood between the decks were 24 white mice with chains around their necks.
Their music is simplistic, but also incredibly creative and catchy too, with Kerr and Faulkner knowing the age range of their audience, but still retaining an artistic passion for the eccentricities of folk rhythms and sounds. You can tell that these were songs produced under a small budget, and I don't mean that as an insult. I think it's that homemade charm that wonderfully fits in with the quaint appeal of the show.
That poor old king of nowhere just sat there looking sad. He said, if you could help me, I'd be very, very particularly glad.
The animation for this show is noticeably cheap and choppy, but not in a crude or lazy way. Quite the opposite. You can tell that Oliver put intellect into each character's movement and gesture, knowing when pauses are required or how a character needs to react, as he finds emotion in little shuffles, twists, or prods of the puppets. A lot of these characters don't open their mouths, yet Oliver manages to bring them vividly to life, using the voice acting as an influence rather than a crutch, knowing when the smallest movements can say a lot when it comes to character animation. Although, the show isn't always in stop motion, because when Gabriel sings, he suddenly becomes a hand puppet, which helps him to sync his mouth to the singing. To conclude, Bagpuss is a touchstone of British animation and children's entertainment. It is something for the British to be proud of. This is more than your regular morning TV kids content. It's profoundly witty, culturally diverse, and artistically sophisticated, qualities that are rare for something aimed at kids. This isn't babysitter fodder, it's high quality entertainment that happens to be aimed at under 10s. Bagpuss is a piece of golden treasure that needs to be passed on from generation to generation, and it will always hold a special place in the hearts of British people who grew up with it. I've been Jamboree, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, then feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please don't forget to press the notification bell. Also, please consider supporting me by making a monthly pledge to my Patreon in return for awesome rewards. Thank you. Now, if you don't mind me, I'm getting a bit tired. Oh, cheerio, folks.